So welcome everybody, episode 8, and by popular demand, it's gonna be the math and numbers behind IK solvers, probably and hopefully, if everything goes well, a relatively short stream. So before we get into the leg IK, I thought it might be worth it reviewing some basic trigonometry. If you haven't been following the pilot season, you can fish for this one, like for a trigonometry subject. I think there was only one theory video about it, and it's pretty much got everything you need and more than we're actually gonna bother, because we only need the cosine and not even trig, like maybe the Pythagorean theorem might get a honor mention. And yeah, go if you have absolutely no idea what I'm talking about when I'm saying, the cosine of an angle, maybe go and watch that first. Now, quick thing about the stream itself, we sometimes do stream or the YouTube videos, whatever it is that you're watching. We sometimes do math videos. The idea of this is not to give you a comprehensive education in mathematics. It's like it's a big subject. Some people spend decades learning it. It's definitely beyond the scope of what I can do in 50, 60 minutes chunks. But there's a ton of really good resources out there. Khan Academy is amazing. There's a lot of really good websites, and we're gonna poke at a couple of those maybe over the course of the season when needed. And the main problem that I see so very often is that, it's not clear. Like if if you're new to rigging, or if you've always taken more of the tinkering and artistic path through it, you might simply be unaware of what actual fields or disciplines or subfields, whatever you want to call it, of mathematics actually apply to rigging. And even if you catch a whiff of something being important, then you look it up as a subject in isolation. You hear that trigonometry is cool, and you decide, okay, I'm going to study it. You open up a search engine, and trig is probably one of the easiest, but right away you'll be presented with a lot of stuff that you just do not know how to apply. If you hear that linear algebra is interesting and you start looking it up, oh boy, that goes the linear algebra as a general subject, like that goes wrong quick. It gets intimidating really quick, where you need a very small subset of it for reading. So the point of these is exploring some of the basics and showing people how little they actually need. Now, the other thing that I would like to do, and we'll see how that goes, is and this might take you a long while to appreciate, there's graphing. Whenever you explore a problem, there's a few websites for it. Desmos is probably the most popular, so it's DESMOS, desmos.com. It's free. You don't need the premium version for simple stuff, and this is pretty much all you need to start looking at simple functions. If you're putting together expressions, if you want to figure out the behavior of something, it gets you math notation for free. So you have a little bit of maybe a learning curve to learn what to type in here, but most of the symbols that you use come from programming. So if you're trying to model a behavior, like the relationship between a couple of items, and you need to play with numbers, Maya might make it pretty tough to figure out what is going on. But this is where stuff like this becomes really valuable. So, if you look at something very simple like the square function, you'll see that when x changes, y is always positive. If you start looking at odd powers, you'll see that they actually retain the sign. So if you ever need to look at things like that and you want a visual aid, this stuff is great. Now, we're actually going to use this a little bit because it's pretty useful when you want to explain some stuff. But first, we want to look at the problem itself. Now, so yes, I do have mischief. So IK as a basic idea, is pretty simple. You have forward kinematics, which is FK, where you have a hierarchy and you have a bunch of joints or transforms or whatever you want to think of that problem as. And all you do is you take their values, you take their transforms, whatever they are, you know, if this is the angle and this is like the difference between here and here is this position, and you add them up in a hierarchy, you add them up in a sequence rather, and you say that the sequence that you want these operations to run in is the hierarchy that you've established somewhere. You're pretty much done. It should be fairly straightforward, you know, and that's largely straight up matrix multiplication in a chain. We've seen that in the pilot season. You don't even need that much for IK for the simple case that we're looking at. Now, the IK thing is a little bit different because instead of having this forward propagation of your attributes to figure out the chain of consequences, you might have something like this. And let's not do spline IK for a moment, which is spining. Okay, we're not going to bother trying to draw this too nicely. You have IK inverse kinematics means that you have endpoints and you want to figure out the transform that will get you from one to the other for a certain number of segments. So take a piece of string, you know, don't ask yourself how long it is, put it on your desk, push it from the ends, you'll get something different every time. Now, that is not great behavior for the IK that you use when you're actually rigging. That will be a simulation approach. The problem you have when you do IK in rigging that you want to solve is by just controlling the two ends. So if you have something that is a leg, and this is the minimum, you know, 2 bones IK case that we're going to look at, you have something here, you only care for the position of that something. You have something here, which is usually going to be fixed or driven by somewhere else. So you have the hip and the ankle. How do you find, you know, this transform? Actually, let's pick a different color for that. So let's say the blue is the joints transform. How do you find out this angle and this angle here for these two transforms? Now this one is pretty trivial, but if you add more bones, then it gets a little bit trickier, and the IK Maya needs to be able to deal with an arbitrary number of bones. So already when you have a case like that, the problem is the unknowns. For 2 bones, something like this, you only have 2 solutions, because if you think this is the only possible solution, you know, think again for a moment. And by the way, chat, for the theory lessons like these, your contribution is even more invaluable than usual, if there can be a scale of invaluable. So already, if you look at a simple case like this, you have 2 possible solutions. This solution of, hey, I want this transform and that transform could live on either side of this line. And that is where up vectoring comes from. It's just not possible to solve this problem for your transforms alone. So, so usually something like an up vector comes in, and if you look at Maya, there's multiple solvers. Display toggle. And at that point, what you're doing is, you know, you choose an up vector. It might be anywhere in the scene, but what happens is there's a plane that comes from the head of that chain. The up vector gets projected there. And in this case, we're looking at the 2D case. So all you care about for these is simpler if you want, which is it positive or negative? Do I want, if my frame set is this, do I want my triangle, and this point is pretty much all we need to figure out, to live in the positive plane, or do I want it to live in the negative plane? So already you're adding something to it to figure it out. Now, but that's the entirety of the solution. And there's other things you could do. You could, when you see preferred angle, it basically means, okay, that positive or negative, if when you started setting up the IK, this angle would have put the first transform in the negative, on the negative side of your plane, it means that it will try to preserve that. So similarly, you know, if you have more than one bone, which is where preferred angle always comes in other than the vector alone, that's what happens. You have your chain as you start it. Before you apply the IK operator, it will figure out the angle between the various transforms and use them to be more deterministic. Now, so if we look at a free bone chain, now the free bone chain has the same basic problem. Like, you could solve it on both sides. So already, you know, if you look at the, what is the RP, the rotate plane solver, is the vector 1 in Maya? I think it's RP. So if you look at that, already you need a sign. Like, do I build this trapezoid, this quadrilateral on this side, or do I build it on that? Cool. Now, the problem gets more complicated because IK goes like, hey, I want to go from here to here. With these sides, so all you have is the length of these sides. It could be that, sure, but it could also very comfortably be solved like, whatever it is, should go from the ends. This, like doing it by hand, by eye, but you get the idea. So if you take something like this, if you take this triangle, you know, it's pretty much like, it's a stable system. A triangle is always stable. So you have the ends. There's no wiggle there. Like, if you fix the ends, that's just gonna stay there. If you take something like this, which is, you know, three sides of a trapezoid, like, you can very easily see how you can get, like, you can keep the ends fixed and you can get that kind of movement. It's not like the length of my phalanxes is changing. It's just that the system is a lot more malleable. So, and that's when, you know, your preferred angle or your starting angle, whatever it's called, depending on what you implement, comes into play, where you go, okay, you know what, there's many ways to do it, for the record. There's a relationship between all these angles. This is one way to do it. As I move my chain, you know, up and down, and as I move these points, I would like the relationship, the ratio between these angles to always stay as similar as possible, so that when you lengthen it, you get something that still retains some of that curve, or not really the curve, but some of, you know, some of the qualities that visually make you think of that shape, instead of like maybe getting, you know, these and then these two sides lined up and you go, okay, this shape has nothing to do with the original one. That gets a lot trickier when, you know, your IK needs to warp this thing into something like that, but, you know, I think you get the idea at this point. Now, this could also be solved in closed form, and we'll explain what a closed form is. But it, you know, it becomes a little bit special. Like, you have to make some choices about what closed form you want to choose. So what happens, and I don't know the my internals, I don't know if it optimizes when you have one joint or two joints or three joints. I suspect it doesn't. But you can probably imagine how, because Maya needs, as a general software, is, you know, is obligated to let you do that for any amount of joints, and preserving these angles is not it's not all that easy. I mean, it might sound like it is, but just preserving the ratio like that in one operation is not that easy. So what happens is that IK solvers are often implemented as iterative solvers. And you can, if you open the Maya solver, I don't remember which of the couple nodes that come up it is in, but you can find a parameter called iterations, maximum iterations. So what that is doing is basically, and this will be a super naive approach to it. So it's, you know, the reality of things is that there's much better ways to do it. Is, you know, that you have this length, so you're building, you know, with rubber bands and toothpicks or whatever. You build yourself a little wiggly arm. You could do something like place those, you know, anywhere in the world. You could start from a random position, and for some other problems, especially in higher dimensionalities, this is actually an approach. And you go, okay, if I attract this point towards that without changing any angle, where do I end up? And you might end up, you know, because of the tension in the system, you might end up somewhere like that. And then you go, okay, now if I take this and I allow some bending here, but I don't allow some other parameter to change, and I try to attract it towards this, and this is why, you know, it's called an effector for a good reason, although it's been lost in the mist of times for some people. What do I get? I get this. Okay, has this reached that point yet? No, not yet. So, okay, if I attract it again, and as before, I go, okay, I want to not change another set of parameters. What do I get? And you might get another stage that is like that. So you keep doing it until at some point you basically have gone, okay, this is unchanged, and my goal, which was to get this point there, has been satisfied. So by iterating this thing, like by pushing it around, not in a simulation way, not by going, hey, here's the forces and propagating them forwards, but in an inverse way where you go, I have an endpoint and I'll do whatever it takes to fuzz the numbers until this has reached there. At some point, you're finally gonna end up with a solution that respects your conditions, which is, you know, I have 2 points in space, which are my handle and my root, and my effector is finally exactly on the handle. So I will look at what angles it took me to get there, and I will then place my transfers there. So what's it in? 20 minutes of Blackboard, not too bad. Does it make sense? Chat, I need you. So stream is what, delayed like 10 or 15 seconds, something like that. Let me know if this makes sense and we'll move on if it does. If not, ask away. First answer, string sketching up. First answer, so sure. So let's move on. Like interrupt and ask away if it doesn't make sense. So I said I've mentioned closed form solutions. Now, by the way, if you ever look up IK and you want to do a bit of research, there's a bunch of things you'll find. Yeah, some people that I know to be mathematicians are saying, yeah, all good here. Yeah, sure. Sure, buddy. It's all good for you. Okay, so now there's a couple ways to do it, and I'm not going to go into those because we're not doing these. We're doing the closed form solutions. Jacobians are one way to do these iterations where you can constrain a system, spin the wheel, and get a result out. There's Gaussian reductions. There's Gaussian-Reitner reductions. So if you start looking for academic papers on iterative solutions to IK, you will bump into some pretty hardcore stuff. Well, it's not really hardcore, but it's you know, advanced by most standards. And you'll find that some solutions are Jacobian based, which is, you know, arguably non-integral, and then you'll find some solutions that are integrals. And like people go like, okay, I'll never understand IK. So it's a bad example to start on those subjects. That's the other thing. If you want to, sorry. So if you want an introduction to things like calculus and integration and Jacobians, these will be not the worst, but it will be a pretty bad point to start from. But I mentioned closed form solutions, and closed form, what can you solve with Jacobian? Gotta Google it. I do not believe somebody's saying, well, you can solve with this. Yeah, really? Yeah. One of the forms to solve it is Jacobian. Gaussian and Jacobian are some fairly common solutions. Do we want to go there? So Jacobian IK, there you go. I think Unity Solver might be. I hope I'm not breaking any copyright stuff. There you go. Overview of Jacobian IK. So there you go. So like just Google Jacobian IK, you can find it. Gaussian-Reitner solutions actually came a lot later, and I don't know how widely they're implemented. So there's Reitner reductions that are pretty good. Anyway, so forget about it. It's the scary part. Now, I've talked about closed form. Now, here's a funny thing. Like people new to math have this vision of it being precise and unambiguous. It's not. Like a lot of words, especially closed form solutions, you'll find that closed form, depending on what field of math and what formulation of the problem you have, might not be agreed upon. And again, if you search for that, and sorry if I'm belaboring these, but it's kind of the example of what I was saying before and what I'm trying to get across. If you look for that, you will find people saying, oh, if you use the closed form interpretation in this sense, then it violates the hypothesis that the quintic is unsolvable. And you go like, okay, again, I'm out. You don't really need that. So the Jacobian in this case will be, the Jacobian solution, these iterative solutions will be a crunch the number solution. So you could consider it a numerical solutions. Anything that is, spin the wheel, do something, spin the wheel, do that something again with different parameters until I get within an acceptable distance of my point or whatever it is, that will be, and I'm using the term loosely, that will be a numerical approach. Now, when something does not have a formula, so that operation, there's something that you do, obviously, there's expressions, there's operations, but there's not one formula that says, hey, given these parameters, I will give you this result. When there's no clear function with a clear coupling, which is what we discussed at the beginning of the season, that is not a closed form. But when you have something that unequivocally, given a few parameters, always gives you the same answer, and it's reliable across the spectrum of what you want to do, that's what we use the term closed form for. So there is, unless you put in a ton of parameters, for cases like these, it's pretty tricky to have a closed form solution like this, because the spine or whatever it is that you're doing starts arched like that. That might have a closed form solution, sure, but it actually does. Even if it requires integration, it's acceptably closed. But your user might actually decide that they want something like that, where they have a bunch of joints of differing lengths and they need to preserve this odd springy shape because the rigging alien. Yeah, you're out. So, however, if you look at simple enough systems like the trapezoid, a convex trapezoid is certainly something that you can solve closed form, but let's start even simpler. If you look at these, all you care about is solving a triangle. So given 2 points and given the length of 2 bones, which is what you have, nothing else in this kind of like V-chain setup, if you think about it, what you want to find is, this side of triangle, I have it, this side of triangle, I have it. If you wanted a, iterative solution, what you could do is you could rotate these in small steps while you rotate that until they touch each other, until they get sexy with each other. Or the other thing you could do, and that would be not the closed form solution, the other thing you could do is go, hey, what if, because I have the length of those, I just solve the triangle for it. So if you have these 2 points, you also have this side. And if you remember the trig lessons, there's 6 elements to a triangle. And you could call these, what is it? Let's use capital and lowercase. I'll look up a couple pages and hopefully that will help. So this will be a small c. How do you do a small c instead of a big C here? So, and the opposite angle to each side is going to be named the same but capitalized. So this is the convention that you find in a lot of elementary, well, not elementary, but middle school and early high school maths. This is the convention you find. It's pretty easy. Now, given the 6 elements to a triangle, given any 3 elements, you can find the other 3. Even less if it's a rectangle triangle because you know one of the angles is always 90 degrees. So again, I was saying, as you know, if you know what to search for, it's pretty easy to do what you gotta do. What is it? There's a site called Math is Fun. So let's see if I can get it in one. Yes, there you go. So if you Google Math is Fun, trig, solving triangle, it might respond to even less. You'll get to something like that. And these sites are often shown as like very kid-friendly stuff. I'm okay with that personally. I reference a lot of stuff that seems very elementary to professional mathematicians all the time. Go for kid-friendly. Kid-friendly is great. So you look at something like this, it will tell you, you know, for three sides you can solve like this. Now this is if you want to remember formulas, which is, you know, it's not bad to do things on paper or on, you know, on a blackboard. It's good practice. It will cement some things in your head a lot. This is the easiest to remember because it's ABCAB. So remember that I want to solve for the cosine of C, it's ABCAB. It doesn't get any easier than that. Then you only have to remember that you add, then you subtract, then you divide by 2AB. So again, this is something divide by twice the sum of the first two. These things appear a lot in math, but we're not gonna go into those patterns yet. Might not even do at all for a couple seasons. Now, so if you look at these, and if we draw a comparison between our AK chain, where we do have the sides, and that triangle, you can see that we do have these. This is one of our two sides. We have these. And by subtracting the 2 points that we care about, we have that side. We should be able to solve it. So let's try that. Now, in the pre-stream, did I start recording? I hope I did. Yes, I did start recording. Man, I had a heart attack for a moment. So, yeah, we're making decent time, a little bit longer than I wanted to, but very simple thing. This is going to be my chain start. This is going to be my chain end. So it's going to be somewhere that I want to reach. There's going to be a distance between the two. We have two sides, and I'm doing something very simple because I don't want to spend a lot of time rigging these. I spent 5 minutes putting it together while I was chatting in pre-stream. And these are going to be my two sides. So, you know, it's not dissimilar to what we did before. What is it? Yeah. And as usual, like if you can give yourself parameters that are not all zeros, then that are not all the same, you're probably better off. Because when stuff is very samey and you have zeros and ones, a lot of problems collapse and become a lot easier. So the other thing we want is a buffer to orient these. And now, I've shown this before, so I'm not going to belabor that. If you take one vector, in this case we want to take the plus y, and if you take another vector, in this case we take the position of our what would be our IK handle, and you find the angle between those two, you basically have most of what constitutes a simple aim. I've showcased that before. So that gets us the general orientation of our chain. I am gonna disconnect that for the time being, because that's not the focus of what we're gonna do next. But we'll hook it up. Now, if I get the distance between the chain start and the chain end, and this is something that we've already done in the previous streams to set up the limited ankle, so you should be familiar with that, or you should be able to catch up to previous episodes if you're not. That distance is going to be this side, so that's all we're going to do. Now, as I shown, you want to, for the limiting of the ankle, you wanted to clamp it for one reason. You want to clamp it for another reason here, which is you want to produce a valid triangle. So this length is fixed. If I don't limit these if I don't limit the length of this side to the I can do it. If you don't limit the length of this side to the actual sum of these two angles, what you could end up is an invalid triangle where you go, okay, these two sides are you know, 180 degrees from each other. You've dragged your locator a long way away, so the third side of the triangle is actually longer than the sum of those two when it's a flat triangle. You don't want that, so you want to limit it. Kind of like homework for you if you want to do it, because for now I'm just going to try and produce valid triangles when I move these around. You're not going to crash or anything, you're just going to get rubbish numbers. So, what can we do with this stuff? Join 1, join 2, join 3. We can negate the numbers and so on, so it doesn't matter a whole lot. What we want first is, because it's easiest to solve, is to find this solution to rotate this, so one of the two angles of the triangle. Now, I'm gonna open my any-media expression editor, and I did want to practice, and I did not. So this might be a complete disaster, but we'll see how that goes. This is the part where a few people start giggling. So we want to work on join 2. We care about, what is it, D? That looks like the Z. Yeah, the Z rotation should do us. We want the Z. Nah, I like the X better for this. We're working this plane. So we're solving a triangle. Triangle always lives on a plane, which means it's really easy to deal with this stuff. And then the aim will get you the general plane of it. So let's go for X. So J2, rotate X. Should be able to do... Okay, so... it's the output. Okay, J2, rotate X. Can I just give it a constant and expect... So if you don't know it, you have all the functions that you need up here. Conversion should give you degree to radians and stuff like that. If you set convert units to none, you will be spared from the dreaded unit conversion nodes that when they're attached to expressions, like I suffered through it on one stream, I believe, they will do all kind of unholy things to your rig. I should be able to just run a constant. All right. That was less disastrous than I was afraid it would be. And obviously the graph editor has decided that, yeah, whatever, buddy, I am going to reorder you and it's going to be random. Sure, have it your way. So hopefully it still all makes sense up to here. Let me know if it doesn't, but that I believe is most of the blackboarding we needed to do, if not all of it. So this doesn't have any inputs, it does have an output, it's not unit converting, which is good, and this message is just flagging whatever attributes, whatever nodes it needs to take care of and track. So I also remember some time ago, yeah, I can just select something and stick the expression editor to that, thank you. Hopefully it works, so yeah, that way it won't jump around. You might need slightly bigger text. Chat, that big enough? That should read, I reckon. So what do we do? If you're studying, and the purpose of this is, you know, study and understanding. Don't care too much about efficient programming or going too fast. Get yourself in as similar a shape as possible. So if you're using this page as a guide, get yourself in as similar a shape as possible as you can to this. So if I am looking at my IK solver like that, and I'm saying, look, I'm gonna rotate positive on the X to solve this thing. This is gonna be negative, I imagine. So let's try it. Yeah, this is gonna be negative, so we'll need to negate, which is not a big deal and all of that. Get yourself something that can do overlay drawings if it helps you, whatever you want to do. Get yourself in a position where you can easily understand what you're trying to solve. And I'm going, okay, this length is going to be A, this length is going to be B, this, you know, tension between these two items is going to be C. Because of my education, I tend to use Greek letters for angles, but I'll try to remember not to. Come on. And this is going to be a small c. This is going to be a big C. So we want to find big C. And we know from that magic page, or because we remember it, that it's going to be a2 plus b2 minus c, well, sorry, a squared plus b squared minus c squared, divided to ab. So, can we do that in our expression editor? Whoa, okay, sure, that happened. Yes, we can. So, start by, you need to know a little bit of Mel if you use expressions. This is the easiest way to study some of these simple subjects. So we're gonna go, okay, we want side A and we want it to be a float. So let's start it at 0, and we want to say to do the same with B and C. We'll probably get a couple of parameters out of these. So we also want to get the square of those, because we're gonna square them multiple times. We've seen that. I should probably do something like that. And I don't know how the expression editor is these days, but when you get an error, it shouldn't clear anything. But if you made the mistake of doing reload or something like that, you're in dire straits. So I do suggest that you get yourself a text file, and if you're writing complex expressions and you're playing with parameters, get yourself a text file and copy and paste often, because it's, you know, it is not a real editor meant for complex editing. So it's a window that's supposed to interact with Maya to some extent, and it will let you down. So Paul, I think it's, let me check my functions. Yeah, power. So the square, I think it takes a float and an int. We'll find out soon enough. Chat, you still with me? Does this still make sense? Actually, let me also check that the light of day is not making the green screen freak out yet. So okay, not too bad. Yeah, hanging in there. Now we have the squares, so we want the square of A plus the square of B minus the square of C. Yes. And closed. Be liberal with your parentheses. I honestly don't remember the operator precedence for mel. Like what? Obviously, we'll do, you know, multiplication or division before a plus, but I don't know if you'll run the. If I put something in here and then something else, I don't know if it will choose to run this part of the operation, even if it's a mode, and then this. So yeah, be liberal with your parentheses. Will spare you pain, in my experience, if you don't know a language. And I can't say, in all honesty, that I know mel that well. I don't want to. So that, in theory, should be as simple as it needs to be, and all it needs to be, which is where you want to go with it. That gets us the cost, so there should be an R cost in mel. I'm pretty positive there, yes. Man, if there hadn't been, this would have been a disaster. So I reckon, now mel might not agree with me at all, but if I was mel, I would take it. Expression invalid after edit, yes, because I forgot that this is not Python. Still invalid, so let's have a look at what is going on. Attribute not find, a variable missing, yes, I've forgotten. So this is like the weird thing, if like, do you need the semicolons? Yes, so I don't want this to turn into a mel lessons. Maybe, you know, there's a lot of videos out there for this stuff. I'm not very agile in switching to it because I don't use it enough. So we're getting closer. Cannot find procedure acons. That's fair enough. What we want is acos. Division by 0. That's good. That's fine. So you need the semicolons. Variables in mel need the $sign before That's all I'm gonna say about it before their both before their declaration anywhere and before they're actually used. So any identification of a variable, you need the $ in front of it. I don't know if there are exceptions, and it's a strictly typed, let's say strictly typed language. So not like Python, more like C-ish kind of languages where you go, okay, before you do anything, you gotta say this is this and this is that. This is a float and something else is an angle, but I don't know if there's a type for angle. It's probably just gonna be a double, but you get the idea. Now, getting somewhere. No, okay. Yeah, that's not too bad. Now the next thing we want to do is take the two sides. So we were smart and we call them sides. The smart there was sarcastic because it's not a great name, but that's why we're catching variables and renaming them. So if I do that and a bit of that, and the last one not really. Oh wow, Control Delete works. That's great. So the other one I want is the distance between these two should have a single output. I want it clamped. I will just produce garbage numbers if it's non-clamped. No, there's data types, string in, float, vector, matrix, and arrays of those. Yeah. So someone was saying you're always better off using Python if you expressions are better than Python nodes. I'll leave it at that. We'll go into evaluation at some point, but if you want to write any code that is run once, Python is perfectly fine. If you want anything that goes into the graph, Python is a really strong handbrake that's been pulled on your rig. I don't recommend it. So anyway, the distance, no, I'm gonna clamp it because I don't want to, God knows what happens. So the distance should be a single. What I would like is actually a minimum, but I don't think there's a minimum node in Maya. And I'm afraid of what will happen when I start connecting that. So maybe I will use pinning this time and see what damage gets done. And so we want to take the distance between those two. We want the maximum to be the sum. Okay, so this is the input. Let's use the R channel. The maximum it should ever be is this sum, and this is where you can start seeing, come on. This is where you can start seeing that this name was maybe not that brilliant. And the minimum is whatever we want to limit it to. So this is exactly what we did. Let's say that we never wanted to collapse fully. This is exactly what we did in the ankle limiting, which will hopefully help. So this clamp is going to be, I would probably normally call it a tension, but let's go for something simple. I don't think Maya has native nodes for trig operations. Please tell me I'm wrong. No, I'm afraid you're right. At some point I had libraries out there for that. I maintained them for like 3 versions, then I got tired of it. Somebody I know is doing something about it. It's been asked for a long time. Everybody, like the first set of nodes everybody writes is, hey, here's a few actual nodes that you need. So we want that to be clamp distance, and this is probably gonna be called something with colors because it used to be shading friendly. So output R. Now I would expect these to work, yes. So I have the script editor in another window because I don't want to clutter this too much. Oh wow, I forgot that we were actually running the operation. So you can sort of starting to see how there's a relationship between these numbers. You might not see it as correct because it's not. Don't get me wrong, it's certainly not correct at this point. So let's start by getting these in line. Now, what is happening here? It's pretty obvious and it's okay. I could have done it right from the first moment, but I guess it's good to go with the flow, because these are, if you're unfamiliar with these things, you know, these are mistakes you will make. Well, not really mistakes, they're parts of the process that you will bump into, and if you don't know what is happening. So what is happening here is that when you look at a triangle, for, let's say, I would expect, let me grab a fresh piece of blackboard. I would expect this behavior. So this angle matters to me. Now, we haven't solved this one, which will be rotating this item here. But even then, what is happening is that in this straight kind of configuration, this angle is 180. This triangle has been flattened. As you close in between these two, this angle actually diminishes considerably. So in a way, it's sort of the opposite of what you have in here, where because you're in an FK kind of setup, for you, this situation is a zero angle, whereas this is a higher angle being created. Hopefully that makes sense. I think, you know, it's one of those things, you bump into it, so I feel like mentioning the theory might be useful. So what you need to do is get 180. So we're gonna do, I used this before, so I know it exists. You want to do 180 minus whatever this result is, and that should be a lot closer. So you can probably begin to see, what is going on here. Like, this is kind of what you expect. So if you mentally, you know, made the switch of going like, hey, if I rotate these that way, that seems to be going all right. So let's do that. Now, when you look at it, what you can, if you only remember one formula, you know, you're still gonna be fine, because you can rotate your parameters around. What we want to do there is, if we repaint these for a moment, you could use one of the angular solutions, but the angular operations like sine and cosine and so on are a little bit more expensive than power and division. So if you can solve for the sides when you have them, yeah, do it. So anyway, without further ado, we have these. We are ignoramus. We only know the one formula. Just rotate your numbers and letters around. So we want to still solve for what we know. We're gonna go A, B, and C. So if we want to find these, it's exactly the same formula as before. So I have it there. Why am I doing this? It's exactly the same formula as before, and then you can do a substitution. Again, like, this is going to be super straightforward for some of you, but it might not be for others. So we add later these things. So we know this formula. What you need to do now, again, if you don't have access to the internet, you only remember the one formula, is simple substitution. If you have access to the internet, and you've already labeled all those things, then you can very simply use that. And the pattern is also pretty simple. If you don't, and it's generally, what am I doing here? So this is my pen freaking out again? No, okay, yeah, my pen is freaking out a bit. Mischief in transparency mode and Wacom drivers apparently don't really get along. Anyway, this is a simple substitution, and you'll find all of these variations. Now, because I don't want to confuse these too much, let me put these on the side. Let's forget about this part for a second. Let's keep our letters as we had them before, which would have been, what were you using? So we definitely had these as C, which means this side is going to be C, and I think we did these. So now what we want to find is this angle, which is B. Go to your page if you don't remember it, but it's CAB, CA. So it will be, CAB, CA. So it will be C squared plus B squared minus sorry, CAB. CA. It's really hard to talk and do these things in your head all at once. Minus b squared divided, and it's always the first two that you divide for, so it should be 2CA. So that's what we're gonna do. We do have all those numbers. Hopefully that makes sense, because at this point I've been back and forth in that a bit. Chat is... We got one of the best nicknames ever on this stream, who's joined the chat. So let me, like, this transparency is really messing with my tablet. CA2B2, so CAB2, CA. I don't know why I've made such a big deal of this, because it's actually pretty simple. So we take this and we substitute. So we say C, A, B, C, and A, and that should give us the first angle. Now, what do we want to do with that? We're working in this direction for convenience, and we'll be working like that. So it's a negative that we want. Yeah, it could go either way, but because we're collapsing in that direction, let's go for a negative, and we are gonna say that it's gonna be J1, I think, yeah. J1 rotation X. So not too bad. Okay, so that is the, because it's taking the distance and we're only solving the triangle for the plane, it might not be super clear right now. I wanted to do more graphing. I don't know if I have time, because in theory I should be scooting out in 10 minutes. But there you go. That's literally all the solution for an IK is. So that solves the triangle. That gives you the angles inside. The next step is, you know, a little bit of linear algebra, or you can choose to use more trigonometry, but what you want, and I don't remember if I was doing it. No, it was probably pre-stream, so there's a very simple way to do it. So the next, like, this has solved the triangle, we're good. The actual IK solution is done. This one we don't need to rotate. If you were, I don't know, if for some reason you wanted to solve a triangle and not the IK, and you wanted to rotate these in like that, just take 180. The sum of all angles inside a triangle is 180. So take the two angles you already have, add them together, subtract them from 180, and you got that angle as well. You're good. Now, I've done a lot of these in the pilot season. So if you look at the matrix videos, you will find explanations for a lot of that. But there's kind of a hype, and we've done these in the previous sessions. With the, I've called this angle, which is confusing as hell if you weren't looking the pre-stream. Angle between is the node I'm using here. So let's switch to, yeah, these are the node names, just for a moment in case you want to look them up. You know, this is what I'm using. So angle between, we are working of an axis, and this is where you go, okay, what's your word? If you start using word axis, basis vectors, whatever you want to call them, what do we need to do here? We have this, and if this was parented under something like the heat part, you might want to extract the y-axis from that transform, but in this case we're working in word space. So if I take wherever this is in space, and if I take my basis vector for the y, which is just going to be 0, 1, 0 in this case, or anything, any vector that has a value in y and only in y, which is what I was doing in the pre-stream. Then we take this one, which represents this position. The angle between those two, and the magic of the angle between node, is basically gonna build you a very simple aim constraint. So I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna switch off the silly node name thingies. And that is basically your IK. So it took me just short of an hour to get two angles out of these, but I don't know, I reckon I'm pretty happy with these as it stands right now. I mean, we haven't gone through the upvectoring, and I don't have the time to go into graphing. And in my happy little imaginary ideal world, I actually wanted to show both graphing and where you get the popping and why. We might do that at some other time. We'll get back to these, but I need a break from the node editor. You guys probably needed a break from me whinging at the node editor. So that's it. I mean, that literally, people were asking, are you going to implement your own AK? Yeah, of course I am. It's like 2 trigonometric operations to implement your own IK. Why would I not do that? Did I close the expression editor? I possibly closed the expression editor. Yeah, whatever. I suspect, in fact, that I closed the expression editor. So do we have any questions? Because I'll wrap these up very, very soon. Most importantly, does this make sense? It's anticlimactic because at some point you hook in the last 2 things and you go, yeah, okay, that's done. But that's how it is. So that is how you implement your own IK. There's nothing else to it. Now that doesn't have upvectoring unless the rotate the angle between nights, unless it's it's doing some ridiculous magic, which it's not good. We don't like ridiculous magic. You probably would want the upvectoring in all of these, and eventually we'll explain that as well, because we are going to implement some of these. So if you have the restriction of only using vanilla Maya, would you still use this expression rather than the native solver? That's a good question. So if you want to know the speed of something, there's only one way to know it, and that's profile it. Doing this, like you can very easily output these things to the joins that you would use an IK solver for. So as I mentioned in the previous stream, I don't like the fact that the IK stuff in Maya creates like this stuff. Like it creates global state, but it's necessary to solve the rig. So when I export my rig as an asset, then it might contain them and it might wreak havoc when it gets imported if there's odd clashes. I don't know. I don't like that a lot. So I will, if that's an absolute need for you, if you can't have global state in your pipeline, let's call it that, then you will be bound to use these because you just cannot use these nodes. Now, if you don't care for that at all, because that's not how your pipeline works, and all your pipeline does is it always builds the rigs in the scene as a procedure, then you don't have that concern at all. Then measure it. And measure it for, end characters, because expressions are actually not as low as people think, especially if you don't do silly things, and sometimes by splitting them or coupling them and all of that you can optimize a little bit, but they will make some part of your graph locally serial, so you can run in parallel multiple expressions on multiple threads at the same time, so they need to shuffle your graph a little bit, which makes it less parallel, but they do not, unlike Python, they do not narrow your evaluation unless you're doing some funky stuff where you're fetching attributes from elsewhere in the graph that is not a direct connection of sorts, and fetching state. It's like if you start that, you can add full scripts in here. It's very easy to make a mel expression that becomes so brutal that the parallel evaluation will go like, nah, not gonna deal with these. Once I get to this expression, one thread is all you get. Once I get out of it, I'll see what I can do. So measure it is the much shorter answer to that. It might not be as bad as you think it is, and it might get you some pipeline advantages. It might turn out to be terrible, and then it depends on whether you want control, and you might want other closed form solutions. So the vanilla Maya is, the question was if you have the restriction of only vanilla Maya. If I don't have the restriction, I'll write myself a C++ node. This thing will take me, I don't know, maybe half an hour to an hour to write. How would you add a pole vector in these? I wanted to, I gotta shoot out in a minute, but we will look at it. There's a couple different ways you can do it. You I reckon the stuff that's in the pilot season for matrix math is probably enough to help you. To take it as homework for now, actually. If this is semi-familiar to you, if you're a complete beginner, you haven't watched the math sessions and all of that, this might be too much. But if you're middle of the road and, you know, this was a revelation to you, but you understand the numbers easily enough and you've done a little bit of linear algebra, your homework in the next 2 days is add a pole vector to this. It's not super hard, and there's many ways to do it. You could add something on top and figure out the projected angle, add another. I'm not giving you the solutions. I'm just explaining there's several ways you can do it. So there's no one right way to do it that you got to fret about. You could use multiple aims. You could extract one aim and you could sort of extract one vector and then re-aim. There's many ways to do it. You could also do it in here. So if you want the stricter homework, I will say get yourself another object in there and try to do it with the stuff that we discussed in the math episodes for pilot season. So no more questions, I take it. I'm giving it literally 30 seconds for the stream to catch up to me asking. If there are no more questions, I'm gonna close these and call it a day. It's less than I wanted to show. It's both, I spent a lot more time on the blackboard than I thought I would have had, which is often the case. I need to get better at that. We'll do it again, because I think the graphing part, there's something about being able to tweak your own numbers and formulas and see how they behave. And I wanted to use this as an example, because you can actually glean a lot from graphing these in multiple, like graphing these for multiple slices. We'll come back to it. But at the same time, I don't know. I think, you know, for a lot of people, this is probably going to be pretty cool. I think this is going to open a few doors for a few people. Hopefully, well, you know. All right. There are no more questions. So thanks everybody for watching, especially the people on the stream. Without you, there will be no stream, honestly. If the chat wasn't busy, these will not be happening, so give yourself a pat on the back. If you're watching these on YouTube and you're not attending the stream, you know, give a figurative pat on the back to the people that are, because these exist because of them. And with that, I'm out. Thanks everybody for watching, and I will see you in a couple of days for the stream, or whenever if you watch the YouTube channel. See ya.